The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The season, the 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great.
Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, everybody. Good morning. Welcome in Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Happy Monday, everybody. We are off and rolling. I hope everyone had a good weekend. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett, and of course, the one, the only Mr. Casey, Mr. in the producer chair. Casey, we'll start with you. Good morning. How was your weekend?
Good. It was good. I had the Notre Dame Penn State McAllister Bowl. That was fun. I think I ended up becoming a Penn State fan because I got very upset that Drew Allard threw that pick at the end there. But, you know, I'll be happy with a Notre Dame win. Get to watch them in the championship. That'll be a good time. Jack Sawyer has basically locked in pick 17 for me, I think.
I think so.
That was a fun game to watch. Kudos to Ohio State. They paid to have one of the greatest rosters of all time in college football, and it's paying off. Then NFL playoffs. Those were bleh until last night. That was a good game. Jaden Daniels, I said at week 3 that he was going to be a dude. Turns out he really is that dude. So that was basically my weekend. A lot of football watching and relaxing. What about you guys over there?
Yeah, I mean, I watched football all weekend. It was spectacular. We're still battling the cold a little bit, but it's getting better. So I don't know. It was a solid weekend, just a regular weekend. And the usually the wild card round is my favorite round. I felt like this week was really bad, really bad. But you know, it's just what it is. Sometimes you get some duds, and this year it was full of duds, and I knew it was going to be duds because it's the bottom of the wild card in the AFC. We knew what those teams are. So I'm not shocked that the Broncos got obliterated, and I'm not shocked that the Steelers got obliterated, and I'm not shocked that the Chargers are frauds. But yeah, it was just solid. I mean, it was a fine weekend.
Yeah, it's good. Good. Always good when you got football, you know, basically start to finish on the weekend. So it was, I would say, one of the better football weekends of the year probably, and then we're going to get another great one this weekend. So yeah, not tough to complain. Tough to complain.
Yeah, that the Ohio State, I mean, the Penn State and Notre Dame games seem like ages ago. Ohio State, obviously, we'll talk about them coming up in a bit. Like that game seemed like forever ago as well. Again, just so much football when you have the overlap of the college football playoff and the NFL playoffs going on. It just seems like we're talking about ancient history. But we're going to talk about the national championship game more coming up in a bit. Ohio State, Notre Dame. That'll be your inaugural 12-team college football playoff national championship matchup. A lot of cool storylines circulating that. We'll get to that. We'll recap Ohio State, Texas shortly as well. Cincinnati Bengals potentially in on a big-name defensive coordinator. I don't know what that means necessarily. We'll get to that coming up here shortly as well. By the way, Casey, when you brought up the Jack Sawyer thing, don't make me have to root for a Bengals player. Please do not make me have to be a fan of a player on the Bengals nonetheless. But that would be a nice get. Do you think he drops that far in the draft, Jacob and Elliot? Do you guys think he drops that far?
I think that's right about. I actually would say that's a little bit above where I think he's going to go.
He moved up.
I think he's in like the 18 to 25 range, the first round playoff loser range on the draft board. But he's a multi-time captain on a playoff team from here with multi-years of production and hits the size profile that the Bengals continually draft. So basically checks every single box at a position of need for a guy that's probably going to be on the board. So that's kind of why we're all marking it in there. It seems like about as much of a Bengals pick as you can get.
Fair enough. But all right, we'll get into that more coming up here in a bit. I know we'll talk some Bearcats too. Wes Miller. People just seem to, I mean, look, when people get cold and bored in Cincinnati, there's no better hobby than let's just bash head coaches, right? But is this one warranted? We'll get to that coming up here in a bit. But let's send it to our guy, Elliot, as we kick off the week, and we'll kick off the show with Elliot's headlines.
Score updates, breaking news, local and national headlines. Whatever's going on in the world of sports, Elliot has you covered. Off the Bench brings you Elliot's headlines.
Nah.
No whistle.
Someday.
Well, someday soon.
Someday.
We'll start with the NBA. The Pacers, 108, Cavs, 93. The Cavs' 12-game win streak falls short last night. Nembhard, the leading scorer there, 19 points for the Pacers. But I had to get that out of the way because I get my ear wrung by Mouse Cop in the chat if I don't mention scores in the NBA, about especially the Cavs. So had to bring it up. Moving on, college basketball, there were some at least one good win in the city of Cincinnati this past weekend. You had Xavier getting their first Big East win against DePaul, 77-63. They took care of business. Jerome Hunter, 10 points. Shout out Jerome Hunter, our guy. Zach Fremantle, he had 20 points and 10 rebounds, double-double. 19 from Conwell. So Xavier gets on the board in the Big East. Let's check out how that other team did that Kinner mentioned. Oh, they lost. How many points did they score, Jacob? Any idea? Any
surely
guesses?
more than like 40.
No, they didn't. 40 points. The Bearcats scored 40.
That's not a lot
They
of
scored
points.
40 points, and they lost by double digits to Kansas, 54-40. Here's the craziest part. If they make a single shot in the second half, they win the game. Yeah. They win the game. In 40 minutes of play, Kinner, 40 minutes of college basketball, you want to take a guess how many free throws the Bearcats shot?
I'm going to say 0. Is that
They
possible?
shot-
Do they get to the line 0 times?
Almost. They shot 2, and they missed 1. So you made a free throw.
They missed one.
It was about as bad as the team could possibly play. Dylan Mitchell had 10 points. He was the leading scorer. He scored a fourth of the points. Dan Skillings had 9, about another fourth. And then the rest of the team, and Page scored 9. So 3 players made up 3/4 of the 40 points. And the rest were terrible.
But Wes Miller did say that he liked the energy and effort.
He did like the energy and
that's-
effort.
that's
And here's the
really
thing. And here's the thing about Wes Miller. Here's the thing about Wes Miller. He's got your name written down if you're against him right now. He's got everybody who's doubting
There's
the Bearcats.
two types of people.
There's 2 types of people. There's either the guys that are believing him right now and they're 0-4 stretch, scoring 40 points in back-to-back games, or you're against them and they're going to use it as fire to build off of.
Which group are you in?
Yeah, they're probably have my face in the locker room right now, and they're gonna use it as fuel because I am so pissed off watching. It's ironic because Wes is always pissed too. I'm pissed off watching the Cincinnati Bearcats. I'm about done with it. Kinner's right. Yeah, do we like to pile on coaches? We sure do, but that's because it's the better alternative than piling on a bunch of 20-somethings that are just trying to do their best out there, right? It's Wes Miller's program. I'm gonna blame Wes Miller in year 4 for continually not getting it done. So that's where I am with the Bearcats.
Were there some boo birds out at Fifth Third?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
They were booing the entire game. So pretty much the entirety of that second half. They didn't make a shot, guys. I was watching it. They had like 3 missed dunks, several missed. They went up for a dunk, and I forget who it was. Paige, I think, went up for a dunk. It was like a LeBron poster. It was going to be the coolest dunk ever. Legitimately hit the back of the iron and shot 50 feet in the air. But I'm going to take a deep breath.
First of all, and
we're going to move on.
And I'll say this.
Good. Go ahead.
No, and by the way, you're allowed to be critical. You're allowed to be upset. By the way, when I said that, it's not like Cincinnati fans do anything wrong. Look, you have a football team that mightily underachieved and missed the playoffs. You have a team in the Reds that was anticipated to be, contenders within their division last year, and we knew that season was done well, around the All-Star break. The Bearcats have high expectations, of course. They're, coming into the top 25, and they're not living up. It's all warranted. And I also don't like when people do the whole, oh, man, especially if the Bearcats turn it around and they look at people like Elliott and others who are critical and say, oh, where are you at now? All you do is look at them and say, well, where were you then? Because that's really what it comes down to. If you do turn it around, that's great, but you didn't prove anybody wrong. People are critical because you're not playing well. So if the Bearcats turn it around, that's great. But I hate when Wes Miller and all coaches and all athletes and all, fans out there do the whole, if you don't like us when we're struggling, then don't cheer for us when we're doing well. It's like the Ohio State argument. I saw Kirk Herbstreit and others. All those people who were down on Ryan Day, where are they at now? Well, this is what we expected. This is why we were down on Ryan Day, is because he wasn't doing what he was supposed to. Wes Miller's not doing what he is supposed to. Start doing what you're supposed to, and the boo birds won't rain down on you on your home floor. It's as simple as that.
The chat brings up a good point, and it's a comparison that I've tried not to bring up during this bad stretch, but he's Travis Steele. I mean, he's Travis Steele to a T. He gets all the recruits. You're really excited about the talent on the team. And then they play basketball, and it's like, where did all the talent go? Why aren't they able to score points? It's a very similar situation. And unfortunately right now for the Bearcats, you got to look at yourself in the mirror and say, is this who we're going to be? Is this how we're going to end this year? Because you got a tough road ahead of you. I mean, they're going to say this stretch was tough. This stretch was, a difficult part of the schedule. You played Kansas State, who's not very good. You played Arizona at home, who you should have and probably would have beaten any other circumstance, any other day. And then you played Kansas at home. Great team. Kansas was great. But the Bearcats were favored in the game. They were favored in that game. So, yeah, they're playing – I mean, I guess they're playing tougher opponents than they would in the American, sure. But these aren't like terrible, impossible games to play. They got to take care of business, and they're not taking care of business. But that's all I'll mention. We'll get into the Bearcats later. Let's move on. The NFL scoreboard from the weekend. Let's start with the Chargers and the Texans. 32-12, Texans destroy the Chargers. Absolutely destroy them. I think this is one of those stats where I don't know, like the PFF or the metrics. It was one of the worst statistical games a quarterback's ever played. Justin Herbert. 14 of 32, 242, a touchdown, 4 interceptions. 3 of them were his fault, 4 interceptions. Rushing-wise, Dobbins and Gus Edwards, terrible. Nothing on the ground. Their only positive they had was Ladd McConkey showed up. 9 catches, 197 yards, and a touchdown. It's a rookie record, right? 197 yards in a game?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
At least playoff.
I'm pretty sure it was. It was Puka, I think, that had it before. So there you go. Moving on to the Texans side, CJ, 22 of 33, 282, a touchdown, a pick. Mixon, again, unbelievable, 90-plus yards in the second half, 25 for 106 and a touchdown. They needed him to be good. He was good. Nico Collins, 7 for 122 and a score there. We'll get into these games later on, but that one I was a little bit shocked about. I was a little bit shocked at that one. The Steelers, they did it. They did it again. They got to 10, 9 wins. And then they just said, yeah, that's job well done. Job well done. Russell Wilson, 20 of 29, 270, 2 touchdowns. Lamar Jackson, 16 of 21, 175 yards. He had 2 touchdowns as well. Derrick Henry, 26 for 186, 2 touchdowns. I mean, that guy's unbelievable. I mean, the guy is absolutely incredible to watch. Lamar had 81 rushing yards as well, just for the hell of it. Isaiah Likely, 3 for 53. They didn't really need to do anything in the air. They didn't really miss Zay Flowers all that much because the Steelers were so bad. Najee Harris, terrible. They couldn't run the ball. They were down early. George Pickens, 5 for 87 and a score. And J.J. Watt had a Tony Snell stat line where he didn't record a pressure, a tackle, or a sack. He just showed up to the game and watched. So that's
same as Week 18.
Yeah.
So ending the season back-to-back games without a statistic for T.J. Watt.
28-14, the final score there.
Lamar and Derrick Henry combined for 267 rushing yards. That's the second most rushing yards by a QB running back duo in playoff history, behind Kaepernick and Frank Gore in the 2012 divisional round, where they combined for over 300.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Moving on, the Bills. To start the Sunday slate, Bills destroyed the Broncos, so I'm not going to give myself a pat on the back here, but I am actually, because I knew the Broncos were fraudulent. They just weren't a good team. I mean, they didn't beat anybody all season long. The only team they beat were the Buccaneers, who were fraudulent at best. I mean, the Buccaneers were fun. They were frisky. But I don't think anybody in here was saying that the Buccaneers had a chance to win a Super Bowl. The Broncos, I mean, they're congrats to them. They overachieved this year. You got to see a playoff season for the first time since 2013 or whatever it was. But they're just not ready. They're not ready yet. Maybe they will be. Bo Nix had a decent start to his career. 13 of 22 in the game, 144 yards and a touchdown. Started great. Had a great first drive. And then after that, it was over. Four carries for 43 yards for Bo Nix. All of their 6 running backs didn't do anything. Receiving-wise, Cortland Sutton was okay, 5 of 75. Again, nobody else did anything. Josh Allen, 20 of 26, 272. 2 touchdowns, 46 yards on the ground. James Cook was incredible, 120 yards and a score there. But yeah, it was an easy win for the Bills, and I think we all knew that.
Curtis Samuel had a 55-yard touchdown, which was the longest touchdown in yesterday's NFL games, which made him the king of the end zone. Only 140 people bet on him to have the longest touchdown. So they got $14,000 in bonus bets apiece.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Crazy.
How about that, man? Moving on. Eagles. They beat the Packers 22-10. That game stunk. That game stunk out loud. I hated watching it. Nonetheless, the Jordan Love, terrible. 20 for 33, 212, 3 interceptions. Absolutely terrible. Josh Jacobs was the only saving grace they had. And he got injured towards the end of that game. So absolutely brutal for the Packers. Eagles did okay. I mean, they were okay. 13-21, 131 for two touchdowns. Jalen Hurts. Saquon was solid, 25 for 119. To be fair, he would have added another 80 onto that had he stayed up at the end for a touchdown. But Saquon did his job. They did, a good enough job defensively to absolutely shut down the Green Bay Packers. So the Eagles move on. And finally, as Casey mentioned, the game of the weekend, Commanders, they take care of the Buccaneers 23-20. It was fun. I thought, again, this game still didn't live up to the hype I felt, but it was still a solid game. Jaden Daniels looked fantastic. 24 for 35, 268, 2 scores. He had 36 yards on the ground. Terry McLaurin looked like Scary Terry out there, 7 for 89. He had a touchdown. Baker was okay. Probably one of his worst games of the year, honestly. 185 yards, 2 touchdowns. Didn't do a ton there. Had a hell of a run. He did have that run where he stiff-armed a guy into oblivion.
It got him back into the game a little bit. It rejuvenated the offense for sure. In NFL history, there's been 3 instances of a team having 0 turnovers and 0 punts with a rookie quarterback. All 3 of them this season with Jaden Daniels. Week 2, Week 3, and then last night's game.
How about that? But those are your headlines.
All right, good stuff. Again, Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Elliot Ring, Jacob Tissett, Casey McAllister in the producer chair, and we still have a lot more to get into. We now know who is going to be in the national championship. Ohio State, Notre Dame. Ohio State took care of business against Texas this past Friday. Notre Dame took care of business against Penn State on Thursday, and that sets up a lot of storylines and talking points as we head into that national championship matchup a week from tonight. The Cincinnati Bengals, we talked about it last week, kind of anticipating, well, who are they potentially going to land as their, defensive coordinator? And I think we were kind of all throwing around options last week saying, hey, I wouldn't expect a big name just because of the Bengals don't operate that way. You're still paying Anarumo. You're still paying the contracts of a few coaches that they let go. It doesn't seem like the Bengals' way to go all out to go spend money on a big name defensive coordinator. Or will they? We'll get to that coming up around the corner as well. So plenty to dive into here on a Monday, coming out of the weekend, a busy Monday at that. We'll be right back. More Off the Bench next. All right, and we are back Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister in the producer chair, Elliot Ring, and Jacob Tissett with you here, off and rolling here on a Monday. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Let's talk about college football. The national championship is set. Ohio State and Notre Dame is your first matchup in the national title game in the 12-team college football playoff era. In the first college football playoff national championship during the 14 playoff era, Ohio State came out on top over Oregon over 10 years ago, and 10 years later looking to do the same thing to set the stage for the 12-team playoff football era. But Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame, they might have something to say about that. The one thing I'm most intrigued about, and I talked about this over the weekend a little bit in some of the other shows I've done, I love this matchup because these are 2 head coaches that had to look at their guys in that locker room and get them to buy back in. And to fight back. Like, you think after Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois, earlier in the season, there was no way in hell any of us anticipated that they were going to be a team that was truly good enough to win consistently enough to overcome the worst loss in college football on the season, make a playoff run and get to the national championship game, to beat a Georgia and to do what they had to do to get here and beat Penn State. I think Marcus Freeman, to look his guys in the eye and to get them to buy back in and to erase all the noise and the negativity and the criticisms from outside, the media, even probably their own fans at times, for them to buy into him and get here. It just shows the mental toughness that they all have. You look at Ohio State. I keep bringing it up. After they lost to Michigan, go look at the bags under Ryan Day's eyes. Go look at just the zombie-like expressions he had kind of roaming the shoe. The fights happening, the brawls happening. People are asking him what's going on. He goes, I don't know. Like he looked like he was totally separated from that moment. He had no clue what was going on. How did that zombie, how did the guy with bags under his eyes go in that locker room, look at them and say, all right, let's go win a national championship? I don't know what he did. I don't know what he said. That coaching staff, the resiliency of the players. I think when you talk about coaching, overall coaching teams and leading teams, as critical as I've been of Ryan Day, I've been critical of Marcus Freeman for losing not big games. He's lost bad games at Notre Dame. As critical as everyone has been of those two, for them to get that locker room to buy in, I think that there's no better coaching job that has been done this year than these two. It's not a surprise that this is your national championship game. We could break down X's and O's. You may not like the skill set players that Notre Dame has. You may not like Ryan Day's philosophy on offense a lot of times. But from an overall leadership standpoint, it's not a surprise that these are the two teams in the national championship game. Ryan Day led them here. He had to be a leader for this team. Same thing with Marcus Freeman. They had to overcome horrible losses this season, and yet here they are. I'm very intrigued by this matchup because I think it's two coaches that literally, mentally, and physically had to lead their team here. I'm happy for both coaches and excited for this matchup.
Yeah, I talked about it before the Tennessee game a lot. I said the only thing that's going to be able to stop Ohio State is if they're mentally defeated after that Michigan loss. Otherwise, I was very confident they were going to be able to roll. And it was an indictment on Ryan Day in my mind that he wasn't going to be able to get over that hump. And he's obviously proved me wrong. And he's got these guys playing the best football they've been playing all year on really all three sides of the ball. And they're dominating the best opponent in all three rounds now. Tennessee was the best opponent in the first round. They went and played the undefeated #1 overall team in the second round, and then go play Texas basically on the road in the third round. And then now you get to play Notre Dame, who hasn't lost since, week 2 against Northern Illinois, playing their best football right now. Yeah, I think these two coaches, having their players buy in, still believe in what they have built there, and keep fighting after a loss that should have and would have in any other season of college football history ended your season. Being able to, lock back in for a new era and a new playoff and say, we still have something in front of us that we can battle for, and both these teams going out and getting it, I think it means a lot. And both these teams have also battled a ton of injuries, which I think is important to recognize as well. Ohio State lost their All-American center, their starting left tackle, and Notre Dame, Riley Mills in the middle of their defense, and now their starting tackle and guard got banged up in their semifinal games. So both these teams have been through a lot all year long, and the fact that they've been able to just have that next man up mentality, and both these guys just buy into their coaches and the staffs in front of them and lead their teams to a championship, I think it means a lot. And these are two teams that absolutely deserve to be here in this new format. If you're going to have a 12-team format where 1 and 2 losses can't eliminate you, this is why. So that a one-game outlier against the Northern Illinois from a team that outside of that looks great can go win a national championship. So a one-game outlier as a 20-point favorite against your rival at home doesn't eliminate you, because Ohio State has proven that they are one of the best teams in the entire country. So the 12-team playoff is working the way it was intended to work, because you have two teams that wouldn't have been in any other format that are playing for the national championship. I think we all agree whoever wins it is definitely the best team in the country this season. I think the 12-team playoff has done a good job of weeding people out.
I think it's been objectively good. I had concerns with all the blowouts, but every single playoff is going to have blowouts in college football. That's just what the sport is. I think it's when you have more games to be played to prove it, I think it settles it on the field. I think, should Ohio State and Notre Dame have been in if it was a 4-team? I don't know, probably not. But that's not the format. So in this new format, they've gotten in, and they've proved time and time again that they've deserved to be here. The other format, I'd argue, there wasn't really a ton of proving anything, right? I mean, usually I would say the best team in the country won, but now it's still the same thing, except the margin size is a little bit bigger. You get 12 teams in, so at least someone down in the 7 to 8 range is able to prove that they're the best team in the country. And I think that's cool. I think that's objectively good for the sport. Despite Jacob's take early on, how Ohio State should have quit and they shouldn't gotten to the playoffs.
They're making edits now.
They are. Your edits
they're making edits of me now with the Ohio State highlights from the playoff after that take.
So
Yeah, I swear to God, there was one with 10,000 views on TikTok.
A lot of mean comments.
Just dunking on me.
The good news is TikTok's going to be dead real soon.
That's right. So, I got one more week to deal with this.
But yeah, I think
He's going to be the most hated guy in China at some point. You know, that's the only place that it'll be kind of rotating. So
I'm happy that the playoffs worked this way because I think this is the most desirable national championship I could have asked for. I didn't want to watch Georgia. I didn't want to watch Boise State, Penn State.
As iconic as these two brands are, it feels like two new teams.
Yeah, a little bit.
I mean, neither of them have won a championship in over a decade. Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like even though it is two blue blood teams, it feels relatively new.
Yeah. Is the world on Notre Dame for this one? I feel like
that I don't know.
I don't know what the public perception is.
I think it's a little too early for any of the handle stuff to be accurate, like any of the betting stuff to be accurate.
Yeah. Are Michigan fans the biggest Ohio State fans this week?
No, I don't think so. I think if you're a Michigan fan, you were rooting for Ohio State to get here. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm obviously not a Michigan fan. But you were rooting for Ohio State to get here and then lose in the worst possible way.
Yeah.
I think that was the rooting interest if you're a Michigan fan. Because you can do the whole, we beat you, you won, so we're the national champion, but you're not.
Yeah.
And Ohio State is. And I think at the end of the day, when you boil it down, when you ask any Michigan fan, we have a couple Michigan fans in the chat. Let me know if I'm wrong. But I can't imagine, even though some might say it, I can't imagine any Michigan fans are rooting for Ohio State to win a championship.
Probably not. Probably
Unless
not.
They would take credit for saying we broke
right.
Them. Like, if they wouldn't have made it here, if Ohio State would have lost to Tennessee or something, the Michigan flag that would be flying would be, we broke them. So there would be that standpoint. But then again, I see what you're like. If they do lose to Tennessee, then it's like, well, how good of a team did you actually beat? And that type of thing. Wanting them to get to the biggest stage to embarrass themselves, where Michigan was on the biggest stage last year and took care of business. So either way, this is going to be a good matchup. I lied. I think it's going to be a good matchup. I think it's two good brands going head to head that's going to provide a lot of talking points heading in. We'll get to the game, I'm sure, more later on throughout the week. But I don't think it's going to be a good game at the end of the day. Maybe I'm wrong, but we'll see what happens.
Was Jack Sawyer's scoop and score a top 5 moment for you in your Ohio State fandom?
Yeah, I mean, I've only been alive for 23 years. I think that's a top 5 Ohio State play of all time.
Really?
Yeah, without a doubt, no question about it. I think it's the second best play of the playoff era for Ohio State, behind Ezekiel Elliott's 85 yards through the heart of the South against Alabama. Just because that team with the backup quarterback, you didn't know that you were on the level with the number ones.
Yeah.
This team, we always thought we were. So to have that play and win the game, obviously it means a lot, and I think it's cemented as top 5. But when Ezekiel Elliott broke that run, it proved Ohio State belonged with the SEC and the other teams. So that's the only play in the playoff era I have above it. I would maybe have the Justin Fields pass to Chris Olave against Clemson up there, but other than that, yeah, I think that's one of the best plays of all time, and I was really happy for Jack Sawyer in that moment because he's from Ohio. He's a Pickerington kid. He's always wanted to be a Buckeye. He was Ryan Day's first commit when Ryan Day got the head coaching job. He was the first guy in the senior class to announce that he was going to come back for his senior year, and he should have had what would have been one of the best plays in Ohio State history against Michigan when he picked the ball off on the goal line. And the offense chose to not score for that entire game, and that play will be forgotten to history. But he gets his play, and he gets his moment, and hopefully Ohio State can end the season on top and hoist the trophy so that one goes down as well as it should. But because of how great that play was, I think maybe an even more incredible play is being forgotten. The third down before that, a toss sweep. Everyone's killing Steve Sarkisian for making that call, a toss sweep on the 1 yard line. But that's a play that works in college football, especially when you have a running back like Jadon Blue, who is as fast as he is. Caleb Downs made an incredible play to fly under the tackle between the tight end and blow that up in the backfield. It was an unbelievable play from the transfer safety. Whatever Ohio State paid him in these playoff games, he is making it known that he was worth every dollar. So I think there's a lot of guys in that Ohio State defense that are really coming into their own. And then you see offensively, obviously, Jeremiah Smith, 1 catch for 3 yards, and you win a game by 2 scores. It's pretty crazy how well Ohio State's playing right now.
Yeah, you talk about Caleb Downs, too, making that tackle in the backfield. He's been doing that all year.
Yeah, he's unbelievable.
I saw Joe Klatt put out a piece, too, for those defending Steve Sarkisian as well, saying, why would you pitch it to the outside right there? Well, it's also called, when you're scouting Ohio State and what the film shows you, you're not running it up the middle on them. You're not going to be able to move between the tackles right there. So that they were trying to take advantage of their speed on the outside, fight speed with speed. Ohio State was just better in that situation. But that Sawyer play at the end, I think I'm with you. That was arguably, especially in my lifetime, the biggest play right there. I remember that Zeke play against Alabama because that was like a holy crap. I remember everyone just going absolutely nuts. The Trevion Henderson run, by the way, a little bit, to close out before halftime, too, got everyone to react. And I thought there were some split screens of almost an identical run between Henderson and then Zeke back in the day against Alabama. But I'm not putting Henderson in that spot. I'm just saying that was another big play as well. But that Sawyer play, it was because it was the defense to put it away. We thought that, man, for Ohio State to win a national championship, Ohio State's defense needs to just get enough stops, but the offense is so explosive, they'll go put it away. It was the defense to convince everybody. They go get Jim Knowles as defensive coordinator, which was a wild move because at first I'm like, why are you going to go get a DC from the Big 12? The perception of the Big 12 for a long time has been that's all offense, no defense. Ohio State has no defense, and you go get a defensive coordinator from the Big 12. Why would you do that? And the criticism was warranted for a while because that defense did not show any major improvement for a while. We're seeing that. We've seen it all come together over the last month, that scoop and score to run the length of the field. I mean, and the cool thing is you see all the social media clips of everyone kind of recording where they're at, various sports bars, their buddy's house, wherever. Every single one, it was everyone jumping up and down, cheering. It was such a cool moment. It reminded me with the Bengals play from a few years ago in the playoffs, to take it and run it to the other end as well. It reminded me of that a bit. But easily the biggest play, I think, because it was just the explanation point. The defense closing it out where they did, I thought that was pretty neat. So, yes, I think it's the biggest one.
And I want to give a big-time shout-out to Texas. They completed a game against 2-3 first-round draft pick D linemen without committing a single hold. The same as the last 11 Ohio State opponents. It's now been 12 games where Ohio State opponents have not been called for a hold. Ohio State ranks 134th out of 134 teams in opponent penalties, and that just seems impossible.
It's
impossible.
That's impossible.
All right, we'll pick up with this more when we come back. Again, this is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. More Off the Bench next. All right, and we are back off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. This came out just a little bit ago, according to On3. Clemson is working to hire Penn State defensive coordinator Tom Allen as its next defensive coordinator, according to ESPN's family. So there you go. That's an interesting one right there. Clemson needs a lot of help, though. They need to hit that transfer portal. They need to change their ways a bit.
They might be going too deep in the portal. They're getting a ton of commitments from guys that they just don't need. They're up to like 5
for positions.
6.
I remember you saying.
Yeah.
I remember you saying like positions that they, if you looked at the priorities that they should have and holes they need to be addressing.
Yeah.
They're adding people from the portal, but you're right. It's positions that they don't technically need.
They just went and got another off-ball linebacker from Alabama. It's like they're just filling this roster with a bunch of old guys that they have young guys that are really good. So I don't really know how that's going to work. But if Dabo does commit to the portal at least a little bit, Clemson's going to be just fine. He's a really good coach, and they're going to be all right as long as he uses the resources that he has in order to win.
You know, speaking of the portal, and we talk about recruiting a lot too, this national championship matchup, Ohio State, Notre Dame, I saw a graphic yesterday about Notre Dame that they only have, as far as like a player that they recruited out of high school that's currently on this roster, they only have one 5-star recruit as far as a guy that they recruited in high school and has made his way through the Notre Dame ranks. One 5-star player, and they've only added, I think, 4 or 5 players from the transfer portal. Like this is a lot of homegrown guys. Like this is a testament to Marcus Freeman's ability to develop guys and develop a program, which is something that I think is very difficult to do in today's college football landscape. And to be honest, I don't know I mean, that's a great thing that he's doing. I don't know if you can build a long-term, sustaining, successful program this way just because the portal, if you're not leaning into that, it's kind of the problems that Dabo ran into. Dabo created a dynasty. Dabo and Clemson blew out Ohio State in the playoffs in the biggest stage. They blew out Alabama in the national championship game. Like, Dabo has multiple national championships. He was starting to put a stranglehold on college football, and then the landscape changed, and he didn't change with it and lost the grip a little bit. You obviously have to have some kind of leadership skill and ability to coach to be able to keep the program going. But at the end of the day, it is one of those where you have to adapt. I think it's cool what Marcus Freeman has done. I am curious how the talent gap, though, the talent gap between Ohio State and Notre Dame, how that's going to stack up. It's great that he's got them here with only 1 5-star. It's great that they've got them here with only a handful of transfers. That's great. But at some point, talent's going to prevail, and I'm curious, that's going to be the storyline heading into this one. All the talent, all the 4s and the 5s, all the money spent by Ohio State, and then the true program way that Marcus Freeman's gone about, 1 5-star, just a handful of transfers. That's going to be a talking point I'm sure people spend some time on as well.
I will say, like, Texas's defense, I thought held Ohio State in check.
Oh, for sure.
So if Notre Dame's defense plays similarly to how they played against Penn State, I think if they're able to shut down a little bit Jeremiah Smith, I mean, I don't know if you can have another game where he has 3 yards on a catch, but if you can silence him a little bit, limit the explosive plays. If Ohio State doesn't have one miracle screen pass right before halftime and a scoop and score, you score 2 touchdowns in that game and you probably lose. So every play matters and all that, but I think that Ohio State's talent can be limited by Notre Dame's defense. I think you said you don't know how much of a game it'll be. I think 9.5 points, the spread, I think that's too much. I think it should be like 7.5. I think Ohio State on paper should be about a touchdown favorite, but I would take Notre Dame plus 10 if you're going to give me 10 points. I think they're okay. I mean, I think that they're not, mind you, they're not what Ohio State is on offense, but I think defensively they'll be able to contain them a little bit.
My thing with this game is I just don't see how Notre Dame scores 20 points.
Yeah, that will be the issue.
I don't even know how they put up any points. I mean, their wide receivers struggled against Penn State, whose secondary isn't even close to as good as Ohio State's, and their offensive line got banged up. They're losing their guard or potentially losing their guard, and their tackle is already announced that he's going to be out for this game. So you now have backups on the offensive line going up against this Ohio State defensive line. And Benjamin Morrison's been out for the whole year, your number 1 corner. And Riley Mills got hurt against Georgia, and he's out now, or against Indiana, and he's out now for the rest of this playoff. So I don't know. I think these injuries are going to catch up to Notre Dame, and I just don't think they're going to be able to keep up with Ohio State. I don't know that 10 makes a whole lot of sense in a national championship, but every other champion spread that's been this big is covered. So it's at least an interesting note.
Yeah, and look at what Texas's defense was able to do to limit the big plays against, Ohio State. But Texas has NFL talent all over, really both sides. Texas, when everyone was arguing about their, resume, who do they beat and the teams they did play, they didn't, technically have any wins of substance. The reason they kept getting the benefit of the doubt is just because I think people knew the talent that's all over that roster and the talent that got them that far. I mean, for them to limit the big plays you talked about, I mean, I want to believe that Notre Dame could do that as well, but at the same time, people bring up how good their defense has been throughout the playoff. You've played Indiana, you've played a backup quarterback, and you've played Penn State. It's not as if you've run into these offensive buzzsaws as well. I think Ohio State is that. I think Ohio State scores over 30. I think that this is a blowout. But again, that's what's going to make this interesting is just how completely different both of these teams are. You have that David versus Goliath type of vibe and feel to it, but the last time these two teams have played, it's come down to the wire. I remember 2 years ago, Ohio State was supposed to blow them out, and Notre Dame, made it close the entire way. Ohio State, if it wasn't for a coaching mistake and not enough men on the field down the stretch and just a weird blunder down, they get the win at Notre Dame. That was a closely contested game too when people didn't think it would be. So it might be closer than people think. From a matchup standpoint, I just think this is not a good matchup for Notre Dame when it's all said and done. But we'll see. I do have a question. Your guys' thoughts on a guy that I kind of been up and down on all year, and that's Will Howard. Will Howard right now throughout these 3 playoff games is averaging 300-plus yards a game. He's averaging 2 touchdowns a game, a QBR of about 100. I mean, the guy's been unbelievable. But every time I listen to any kind of national sports talk shows or watch any of these national shows, everyone's just burying Will Howard. I haven't been all in on Will Howard all season by any means. I think I said if we're talking Will Howard, it's usually a bad thing because that means that mistakes have been made. I don't want to talk about Will Howard. Will Howard should be off to the side. Let the big names do the work. that was the thought process when I thought it was going to be the Trevion Henderson / the run game show. I thought the running backs were going to be the stars. When you look at who they went and got in the portal, the top back running back in the portal, I thought it was going to be a 1-2 punch of physical football with the run game. Obviously, we knew Jeremiah Smith was going to be good coming into the season, but I thought we would be spending more time on Emeka Egbuka. The identity of the team shifted and changed throughout the season, and I think we saw Will Howard's role shift and change more throughout the season. He was horrible against Michigan, yes, but in the lights being the absolute brightest, he has been a big-time star this entire playoff run. He made some throws against Texas that I think were very good throws, bad decisions. I think he made a lot of bad decisions, but made good throws, so it made up for it. I think the kid's been unbelievable. I don't know what the ceiling is for him. I don't know what NFL conversations people will have down the road, but for what Ohio State needs out of him right now, I think he's the most underrated quarterback in college football right now. When you look at every major quarterback statistic out there, he's top 8 in every single one of them. I don't understand how Will Howard is not getting more respect. Maybe it's because of all the weapons around him. People are saying he's only good because of that. But Kyle McCord, you can argue, had more weapons around him last year and put up good numbers, but never look like this. Will Howard at times looks like a leader at the quarterback position, something that I did not feel like existed throughout the year. I didn't like his finish against Oregon. I didn't like how he looked against Michigan. But again, the lights were super bright against Tennessee, dominated the number 1 team, undefeated Oregon Ducks, Big Ten champions, dominated them. And Texas put up a lot of resistance, yes, but some of the throws that Will Howard was making, we could sit there and say, well, yeah, Jeremiah Smith, he's wide open. Emeka Egbuka, wide open. Carnell Tate, wide open. These dudes aren't wide open. He is squeezing these into some very tight pockets and making some throws that I'm like, all right, he wasn't doing that to start the season. He wasn't doing that at Kansas State. I think the kid's unbelievable, and I'm still surprised at how people are devaluing what he brings to the table. I think he's been unbelievable.
Will Howard's come on greatly as of late. Statistically, especially his best 2 games of the season by a pretty significant margin were the first and second round of this playoff against Tennessee and Oregon. Yeah. Over 300 yards in both games, over 65% completion in both games, 83% against Tennessee. That's unbelievable. 5 touchdowns to 1 interception in those 2 games. And he played well against Texas, too. Not quite as good, but 289 for a touchdown and an interception. He took 2 sacks, hadn't been sacked in the 4 games prior to that. So he's doing a really good job of that as well. Will Howard was never brought into Ohio State to be a world beater Heisman quarterback. He was brought into Ohio State for 2 reasons. He could run and facilitate the football. He could do anything they asked him to do inside of the offense, at least physically. He was capable. And number 2, he was a leader. He was a guy who started at Kansas State for multiple years, and they saw last year with Kyle McCord in there that just having an arm talent and skill wasn't enough for Ohio State. You have to be a guy that can take the bright lights, you can take the criticism, you can take the leadership. And we saw him fail against Oregon. We saw him fail against Michigan. And the fact that he's bounced back and had the best stretch of his college career in the biggest games of his life, that tells you that they got it right, and they brought in the guy for a reason, and he's proven them right. And maybe he's fallen short a couple times, and maybe that's skill-based. Maybe that game against Oregon, it was early in the season. He hadn't come into his own yet in this offense. I think we saw in the quarterfinal game that if they play that game later in the season, it goes a different way for Will Howard. So obviously the Michigan game is an outlier, but I think that is for all 100-plus players on the Ohio State roster, not just Will Howard. So if you look at this season as a whole, other than that game, he's been exactly what Ohio State has asked him to be. He's been everything that this coaching staff wanted him to be. He's going down in history as a Buckeye legend if they can win one more game. And that's the shame with this team, is they're as good as everyone expected him to be. They're as good as every Ohio State fan hoped they would be going into week 1 against Akron. But they can only get one of their 3 goals. So if you don't win against Notre Dame on Monday, you have what maybe is one of the best Ohio State teams of all time leaving the season with nothing. You don't have a Michigan win. You don't have a Big Ten championship. And if you can't beat Notre Dame, you don't have a national championship. The fact that this team is so good and can only get one of those 3 things, it still keeps me up at night a little bit.
Off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Yeah, Will Howard, again, it's not done yet. But that's the other thing, too. He threw for 289, as you mentioned, and there was some key drops. There was, Carnell Tate, obviously, Egbuka had a drop, and then Jeremiah Smith had a drop that wasn't the best thrown ball, but it was in his hands, could have come down with it. Had 2 or 3 of those drops been catches, he would have thrown for well over 300 yards, and it would have been 3 straight games of over 300 with that. I just like the Ohio State learned from their mistake against Michigan. They wanted the identity to be the run game. They wanted that to be the case with Quinshon Judkins and Trevion Henderson. And now ever since they've had that complimentary run to the pass, they've been a completely different style team. And this is the dominating team we were waiting for. But Will Howard, number 2 in all of college football in QBR, number 3 in QB rating, number 4 in completion percentage, number 5 in touchdowns thrown on the season. Obviously, I think he's top 10. I know he's top 10 in yards per attempt. I think he's number 8 total in yards passing. I mean, he just checks off so many boxes. And Bryce Young, a guy I know you're very familiar with, Jake, if Will Howard finishes the season with his current QBR right now, he would be tied with Bryce Young at 39th on the single season best QBR of all time. I think the kid's been unreal, and he's stepped up at the most important time of the season. So I think that's pretty cool when it's all said and done. But this could backfire. He could disappear against Notre Dame, and then all these last 3 games will just be forgotten. And, yeah, look, Ohio State fans are spoiled. You had Dwayne Haskins, who put up unbelievable numbers for 1 year. Then you got 2 years with Justin Fields and 2 years with C.J. Stroud. And I think last year, I think that's one reason why, like, Kyle McCord's numbers weren't horrible, but he looked so underwhelming compared to what we've been used to for the previous half decade. Same thing with Will Howard. If we don't get that elite level of quarterback play from C.J. Stroud and Justin Fields and Dwayne Haskins for that huge run, I think we're looking at Will Howard in a completely different light. I just think everything's going to be underwhelming until we get that quarterback, whether it's Julian Sain or whoever, that looks like C.J. Stroud and looks like Justin Fields and looks like Dwayne Haskins and puts up the numbers that they did. Either way, just give us. But they didn't give us a national championship. All right, Dwayne Haskins, C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields. They didn't bring a national championship, so I'll take a little less oomph with the title than the more flair that those other quarterbacks had, and we'll go from there. Either way. All right. We'll switch over to Cincinnati Bengals talk when we come back. Again, this is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. The Bengals, big name defensive coordinator. Is it a possibility? I know last week we all kind of lightly agreed. I don't see them going that route, but then after the show, all these rumblings of, hey, we might be surprised by who the Bengals have as their new defensive coordinator. Do they have one already? Is that just speculation, rumor? Are we going to be surprised? Is it going to be a splash defensive coordinator hire? We'll talk about that more when we come back. More Off the Bench next. And we are back. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Okay. Something else, too. Last thing on the college football front, but it does cross over into the NFL. Chicago Bears are looking, to fill their head coaching vacancy, of course. And we talked about this last week. Is the Patriots' job, is the Bears' job? What's the best job that's open out there? Obviously, quarterbacks make a big impact on whether it's a good job or not. Caleb Williams, is he a good quarterback or not? That the jury's still out, obviously. The Patriots, though, they do fill their head coaching vacancy. Mike Vrabel, I don't think that's a surprise or a shock to anybody. I think we all kind of saw the tea leaves forming for this one. Mike Vrabel, the head coach for the New England Patriots. The Bears still looking for their next head coach, but one name that's been thrown out over the weekend that they're requesting an interview with is Marcus Freeman from Notre Dame. So I don't know the likelihood of that, but I did think that was an interesting name being thrown out to interview for the Chicago Bears job.
Can I ask you something? And this is just my opinion on this matter. You get to coach the second biggest brand in college football in Notre Dame, I would say. Notre Dame's second biggest brand.
I certainly wouldn't put it there.
Third? Fourth? Top 5.
Yeah, sure.
You give me top 5?
Top 5 works.
Top 5 biggest brand. You have pretty much unlimited funding.
Yeah.
You can pretty much do whatever you want. You're the king of the castle. Big fish in a small pond, yada, yada, yada. Why would you ever leave and go coach the Chicago Bears? The Chicago Bears are, no joke, maybe the worst franchise in the NFL, bottom 5. And you risk your coaching career by going there. There's a couple NFL franchises I'd leave Notre Dame for, but you would never leave, in my opinion. How much is he getting paid? Do we know this? How much is he getting paid at Notre Dame?
I'll try to find it.
I think he would probably get paid more at Notre Dame, if I'd imagine so, or at least the same number. And if I'm going to be honest, if he wins a national championship, that's all. Like you're already there. You've done it. Why not stay there and try to do it again and just to cement yourself as one of the better college football coaches of the last decade. I don't think the Bears' job is desirable at all. I think the ownership group there, I think it's one of the worst ownership groups in all of professional sports. I don't think they believe in their product. I don't think they believe in the Chicago Bears winning championships.
I don't think they care about the Bears winning championships.
I don't think they care at all. I truly believe there would be no interest from Marcus Freeman to join that organization. I think there's another organization, not that one.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd be pretty shocked if a college coach went to those ranks, but they're putting every interview out there. They're interviewing absolutely everybody for that job. Marcus Freeman signed a contract extension through the 2030 season that is estimated to make him over $9 million annually. So it would be more money to go to the NFL.
And the thing too is, if he did go to the NFL, whatever team plucks him away from college, I think the understanding would be it's going to take some money to do. My thing is this, though, like we say this all the time, and maybe I'm missing one, and correct me quickly. When's the last, and it's a generic question, when's the last coach that had success in college that went to the NFL and had success? I mean, we've buried Nick Saban for it. We've buried Urban Meyer. I mean, Urban Meyer didn't even last a full season.
Chip Kelly didn't get it.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Harbaugh,
to sit
Harbaugh.
here,
Big one.
Harbaugh.
Stanford to San Francisco, Harbaugh's a big one. And then obviously the other big two are Jimmy Johnson and Pete Carroll. But you got to go back a pretty long ways to find success from a college to NFL transition. It just doesn't happen.
And Harbaugh, if I'm not mistaken, started out as a coordinator in the NFL before technically going to take the Stanford job. It doesn't matter. You are right. I'm going to count that still because that's a guy that's dabbled in both and had success in both. But the sample size of success stories, there's not a whole lot of testimonials
Especially
out there
recently.
of guys. Yes.
Matt Rule, Bill O'Brien, all those guys were absolutely terrible.
So, and again, I'm not saying that, and it's going to take one. Just because they didn't succeed doesn't mean Marcus Freeman won't. Marcus Freeman could succeed as an NFL coach. I just don't think it'll happen in Chicago, and I think that's more an indictment on Chicago than it is really any coach in college football that you'd go kick the tires on. Last week, I don't think we got to it, Jake. I know we were talking about it, but there was, Ryan Day. His name was being not linked as far as being talked about him taking jobs, but there's been interest in some NFL jobs, NFL teams interested in Ryan Day, and there should be. Same thing with Marcus Freeman, and the list goes on and on. So it's amazing to see the level of interest in the college coaching ranks without any proof of every time the NFL teams have dabbled in the college roles, it has not worked. But either way, does Marcus Freeman, by the way, does he ever coach in the NFL, do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I think so. No brainer, no question about it. I think he's probably a top, I'll say 5 to 7 name in all of coaching right now in terms of where he's trending and where I think he falls in terms of league circles and stuff. I would imagine he's incredibly well respected. He carries himself very, very well at press conferences. His players love him. His staff loves him. I think he'll be in the NFL relatively quickly. I just don't think it'll be this year, and I don't think it'd be Chicago.
All right, fair enough. All right, Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. What's that? Sorry?
For the record, I think Ryan Day is the opposite. I think Ryan Day would go to the NFL if a job was offered to him immediately. And it's only because I think he's heard the noise so much at Ohio State. I think if he were to win this championship and ride off into the sunset to the NFL, it wouldn't shock me one bit.
I'm circling Chicago. He has a big-time relationship with Kevin Warren, the old Big Ten president, and now he's in charge of the Bears. He's their CEO or whatever. They have a weird setup in their front office because their owner is 99 years old and can't do anything, but doesn't want to give up any control. So he's the one that makes the decisions, and him and Ryan Day have a relationship. So we'll see what happens there. But if they're going to go the college route, I would expect Day to get an interview.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Let me ask you guys, does winning a national championship solidify Ryan Day's future in Columbus as long-term, or does that almost put him in a position where he does what now Harbaugh left for different reasons? Let's just be clear. I do think if there's not a cheating scandal that led to his success, I do think Harbaugh's still probably at Michigan if you ask me. But does it winning a national championship a week from tonight, if that happens, does that guarantee he's the Buckeyes coach moving forward, or does that almost say, okay, I brought a championship to Columbus, I did what I was supposed to, I'm out? And because he could go to the NFL and fail and have any job he wants waiting for him if he wants to come back. I think Ryan Day's in that boat. If he leads Ohio State to a national championship or wins them one with all the success he has had there, all right, have Buckeye fans maybe cherished him the way that everyone believes they should? Probably not. Is some of the criticism warranted? Absolutely. But if he wins a national championship, if I'm Ryan Day, now would be the time I would kick the tires on the NFL, because if you do fail, you could have any job you want in college football when you come back. And I think now would be that time to kick the tires on that. I think he could save face if he does. But I don't know. I don't see that being the case. I could see it happening. I just don't think that's going to happen.
I think Ryan Day loves Columbus. I think Columbus, the players and staff, the people inside the team love Ryan Day.
They like him.
And I think everyone in the Ohio State organization loves Ryan Day, and I think Ryan Day loves coaching the Buckeyes. So I think if he wins a national championship, he's cemented himself as the Buckeyes coach for as long as he wants to be the Buckeyes head coach, barring something terrible. And I don't mean terrible as in 10-2. I mean terrible as in, you finish the season 6-6 or something like that. And then that's when you talk about getting him out. But if he wins a national championship, he's going to be the Buckeyes coach as long as he wants to be the Buckeyes coach. And I sent these guys a text over the weekend after Ohio State got the win against Texas. And I said, well, I'm going to be a bigger man here. Maybe I overreacted about a 70-10 coach over a regular season loss. Maybe. I won't say for sure, but it's definitely a possibility. It's on the table that I overreacted about a regular season loss for a coach that's 70-10. It's definitely a possibility. We'll see what happens on Monday. I'll make my final decision, but I am leaning towards that was an overreaction, and Ryan Day is a pretty damn good coach who recruits his ass off in the offseason and has one of the most talented groups of players we've ever seen established together in college football in Columbus right now, and they're playing like it. So, I'm going to have to owe Ryan Day an apology in a couple days if we get there and get the job done.
Well, Ryan Day, he's had some prolific offenses over the years, and they had to fix that defense. He goes out and gets Jim Knowles. It took a little bit, but that defense has finally been fixed, and you've given a Ryan Day offense complimentary defense, and look what happens. They're in a national championship game. They're favored by 8 is the most recent line I saw on ESPN Bet, and we saw how much, the defense, how important that is. Very similar to the Cincinnati Bengals. Imagine a Joe Burrow offense that we just saw this week complemented by a defense. What the hell can happen? The ceiling, the sky's the limit when it comes to the potential for the Cincinnati Bengals. They're looking for a defensive coordinator. We thought last week, probably don't expect to hear a big name in the mix to land that, but then there were some rumblings from over the weekend that kind of have people thinking otherwise. What is your takeaway? I know that Matt Eberflus's name has been thrown out as a name to keep an eye on. I did just see an article a little bit ago that the Colts are going to be looking at Dennis Johnson, as you've mentioned in the past. I don't know. Where do you think the Bengals go from here? Or could we get back into the camp of expect a big name possibly?
I think those are the two big names that you could maybe expect. Al Golden, Matt Eberflus. I think outside of that, I'm sticking with no. I do think those two names are towards the bottom end of big name, right? I mean, if we go through the biggest names, Saleh's number one. Then you probably get to the Staley, Dennis Allen region there next. And I still don't think the Bengals are going to go pay a Robert Saleh or a Brandon Staley or even a Dennis Allen. I just don't think that's what the route they're going to go. I think Al Golden makes a lot of sense. I think monetarily he makes a lot of sense. It would probably be about $2.5 million, which puts you at about $4 million for the defensive coordinator position, counting what you're paying Lou this year. And that's about what I thought they were going to go to, because that is top DC money. So I think that's how they convince themselves that we are committed. We are paying top defensive coordinator money by counting Lou's in there as well. And a guy like Robert Saleh would require 5 on his own, 4.5 on his own. I just don't think the Bengals would go that high. But Eberflus is an interesting one, because I think a lot of people are going to be turned off on him because of how the end of Chicago went, but he's a really, really good defensive coach. The Colts defense was at a point where he got hired as a head coach. And then, obviously he had his struggles as the head coach of the Bears, but Eberflus, he had the Bears as a top 10 defense when he was calling their plays. And as soon as he got fired, they dropped to the mid-20s. So that's a pretty significant fall off for just losing your defensive play caller and not losing any other real major pieces on that defense. So I would be very, very high on Matt Eberflus. He's a name that I think I just kind of put in that tier 2 area when we were going into the process, because I was pretty gung-ho about getting a Robert Saleh or someone along those lines. But I would be really happy with Eberflus. And I think he's one of those guys that does carry a little weight with his name, and I think it would show the Bengals are pretty committed to trying to win.
I don't think the Bengals will get a big name. This is just, Zach Taylor gets paid $4 million a year. They're not going to go out and pay a DC more than Zach Taylor, especially adding on to the fact you're paying Lou. I think it'll be a guy I've probably never heard of. I don't think we'll get Eberflus, and I don't think we'll get Golden.
So who was by the way, this all started because, and I wish I would have had the report pulled up, but who was the player that made the soundbite that led to everyone talking like this? It was a Bengals player that said, okay, so he said, you're going to be, you'll be surprised, you'll be shocked or something by the reason I think it could be Al Golden too is just because if, basically making it sound as if he knows who it is. It sounds like it could be Golden too, just because you can't announce anything until they're officially done, or unless it's somebody that's on a current playoff team, which I do not anticipate that to be the case.
Yeah.
I think it could be that route. I think so. The biggest name it could be to me is Golden, just from that standpoint right there, because a lot of money to him is not a lot of money for a defensive coordinator in regards to what you would have to get to go get maybe a former head coach type of DC. To come in. Also, keep in mind too, some of these defensive coordinators that are former head coaches, they want to be a head coach again. You got to be weary of that too, because if you bring in Matt Eberflus to be your defensive coordinator, you don't want that path to him being your head coach, right? You don't want that. I think some of these DCs, like Jim Schwartz in Cleveland, that made a lot of sense. I don't think there's a lot of teams out there that are ever going to give him the head coaching gig moving forward. He's a safe DC hire. I think that there's some DCs you got to be weary of because that could be your head coach if things don't go well with Zach Taylor in 2025.
I don't think Taylor cares about this guy could be my successor type of thing, because if he gets this hire wrong and the defense stinks, he's fired. So I think he's focused on getting the best defensive coordinator in this building to call the best defense possible within the constraints given to him by the front office. I think that's a big thing we always have to throw in there as well, is it doesn't really matter what everyone wants or how desirable this job is if the front office isn't willing to pay, which I think is what we're starting to figure out a little bit as we talk through it more, is they're probably not going to be willing to pay. But I don't understand why so many people seem sour on Al Golden. I see a lot of people throw his name in the list of classic Bengals moves, going to get a guy who's familiar with the team, just someone who's associated with the organization, and that's it, not doing your due diligence, interviewing anyone else. He's one of the best, if not the best, defensive coordinators in college football. Coaching Notre Dame and recruiting and dominating. I don't understand why people view that as a punt hire. I think Al Golden would be phenomenal. And it would also show that the Bengals are committed to getting outside of the box, going to the college ranks and getting the top defensive coordinator in college. That's a crazy move. I love that. I would be overjoyed and thrilled with that path being the way the Bengals go. I've seen a lot of people that seem to be sour on Al Golden, and I just don't, for the life of me, understand why.
I don't know what Bengals fans want, because you have to at least think about it a little bit rationally. You can't get the biggest name. Whatever big name you think is possible, it's most likely not possible. If you go this route, I do think it's attainable to get a guy who was one of the better defensive coordinators in college over the past, couple of years, and then you bring him to the Cincinnati Bengals and see what he can do under Zach Taylor for this couple year stretch here until, I don't know, when Zach Taylor's seat would become fully hot and they would have to clean out the staff again. But I think it's worth a shot if you can get him for under $2 million, right around there.
Look, Lou Anarumo around the league right now is viewed as a big name defensive coordinator hire for whatever team he ends up with. I'm here to say it doesn't matter if it's Al Golden. It doesn't matter if it's any name you throw out there. If they don't hit on their draft coming up, if they don't go and target some key guys in free agency, I truly don't think it matters who the hell the DC is. Could they marginally improve with the new DC? Possibly, but I don't think last year was necessarily a Lou Anarumo problem. You just couldn't underachieve the way they did for 2 straight years and keep everyone employed. Like someone's head had to roll. That happened to be him. I think whether it's Al Golden or if you go out and you get Dennis Johnson, or you go out and you get whoever, I don't think it matters. They have to hit. I think the draft coming up, I think it's the players. The players are more important than anything else at this point, because I think whoever they get as DC is going to be a solid defensive coordinator. But Anarumo was a very, very good defensive coordinator, and the ingredients for the chef just weren't that good. It's an ingredients problem, and if they don't improve the ingredients, I just think you're going to get a lot of the same type of tasting meal every single time. They have to improve from that aspect. I think that should be more of the talking point than who they get as DC, because if it is Al Golden and people are upset with that, and they're the same next year, it'll be proof that it's not the DC, it's the ingredients for the meal. And I think, to me, that's where most of the problem lies more than anything else.
I think the main reason Lou got fired wasn't win or loss or any statistic of the defense, but it was his inability to progress the young talent on the team. And I think that's where they're going with this next hire, is they're going to bring someone in who they believe can make the pieces on the team currently much more viable. And I'm talking about young guys like DJ Turner, Dax Hill, Miles Murphy, Chris Jenkins, McKinley Jackson. All these 8 of the last 10 top 100 picks that we've given Lou all this draft capital, and none of these guys have progressed to the level we want them to. I think that's where they're going. And obviously the draft's going to be important. We've talked about the holes on this team a ton. And if you're paying the players we want to pay, you have to hit in the draft because you need cheap options at different places on defense and on offense. But I think step one for this DC is getting some of the young talent that's in this room, in this building, up to par with where we thought they were going to be, what we drafted them to be, because we have talent on this team, or at least we have talent on this team that we thought was talented before they got to Cincinnati. And since they've gotten here, it hasn't looked like that. And I think that is going to be step one for this defensive coordinator. Even before the draft, you got to figure out what you have. Because if all of these guys are busts, then we shouldn't have fired Lou Anarumo, because that's on the front office for screwing this up. But if some of these guys can get to a level where they're at least starters that I'm not asking for Pro Bowlers or All-Pro. I'm asking for guys to be starters.
Yeah.
And we don't have that with a lot of the guys that we've drafted early in the draft. So I think that's the first step for this next DC, and really going to determine how he's looked at in Cincinnati is, can he get the guys that we already have here up to the level that we expect them to be at?
Yeah, and Elliot, you've said it many, many times. This defense, we talk so much. We focus on, look at the Broncos defense. You look at a lot of these, the Chiefs defense. The Bengals, they would love a Broncos defense. They would love a Chiefs defense. They don't need that. You just need an average defense. It's not as if we're asking this team to all of a sudden be one of the most feared defenses in the National Football League. But get off the field every once in a while. You know what I mean? You get that? I think that's what you're asking. It's not like you're asking someone to come in and ask for everything under the stars right now. You're just asking, come in and just stop letting the opposing team just move the ball at will. And that's why I think right now, there's a lot of good names out there. Unless there's just a name that no one's heard of and it's just a questionable hire, I don't think they can necessarily go wrong. The Al Golden thing, from Jacob's point, from a developmental standpoint, that's where someone like him probably fits what the Bengals are looking for more than anything. Because you're right. When I say, the ingredients aren't good, well, the ingredients looked good in college, and they're coming from schools that put a lot of talent in the National Football League. Why is it not working? It could be the developmental problem, and that's probably what a younger coach like Al Golden will check off when it comes to that box. So we'll see. Any closing thoughts on that? Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. I think Al Golden, if you want to consider him a big name, he is the biggest name that doesn't have immediate head coaching interest.
Correct.
Brandon Staley would have a desire to get back into the head coaching world, whether he would have a job opportunity or not. Eberflus would probably have a little bit longer of a runway just because of how it ended in Chicago. But if he gets this defense playing as well as I think he probably would in Cincinnati, I think he'd be back in the list pretty soon. And you get a guy like Robert Saleh, he's getting head coaching interviews now. So he would certainly be in next cycle. I think if you're going long-term, which probably is something that's on the Bengals' mind as well, I think Al Golden makes an awful lot of sense. I'd be pretty happy with any of those ex-head coaches or Golden, but I think in terms of money and years and progression, I think Al Golden hits it out of the park.
Yeah, stability is key there too. You're right. If you're interviewing guys that are taking DC interviews and head coaching interviews, their interest is to be a head coach. And I'm not saying that there's a lot of DCs out there that want to be a head coach, but that's just not going to happen, right? Like, that's going to happen for Eberflus. That's going to happen for some of these names out there. A Golden, not saying head coaching is not in his future, but it's not the immediate future. You want someone to come in here and have grow and have a little, sustainability with too, when it's all said and done, stability and all that. Okay, let's move on. We'll stay in the NFL. Let's take a look at some of the playoff games from over the weekend. Your biggest takeaways from Wild Card weekend in the National Football League. We still got another one tonight. The Rams going to be in action. We'll talk about that coming up around the corner. More Off the Bench next. All right, and we are back. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. NFL playoffs, wildcard weekend. I'm not going to lie to you. I thought the games were all kind of duds. Am I wrong in that? Were they all kind of duds? Like there wasn't a I
thought last night's game, though, was better than the others. I still didn't think it really brought the juice. It was a solid NFL game. I was very disappointed with this weekend's football games. Very disappointed.
Yeah, look, we did our bold takes on Friday, and I was like, yeah, I'm done trying to pretend I know what the hell I'm talking about with the NFL, because I don't. Look, I thought Denver, I was high on Denver because I thought they had some of the ingredients to be a very competitive team in the playoffs, but the Bills are just very good. Josh Allen, I mean, look, there's a reason he's in the MVP conversation, and they it was close early on. And to be honest, the Broncos had opportunities. They had opportunities, especially in the start of that second half, and they just squandered them. And then the Bills started pulling away, and from that point on, it was easy work. The Ravens, obviously, we thought maybe because the Ravens struggles against Pittsburgh in recent years, no matter how dominant the Ravens have been, that maybe that would catch up with them. No, Pittsburgh, they just stink. I thought the Chargers would be better. I thought the Chargers maybe would be the team that would not just win this game, but knock off the Chiefs in the next round. I clearly, it was just a very weird weekend. Everything went chalk pretty much.
Yeah, I will say my biggest takeaway was by far the Steelers. It's going to be my biggest takeaway because we say it every year. Mike Tomlin does a great job. He's a great head coach. He's become Marvin Lewis. Mike Tomlin has become Marvin Lewis. And I think he's one more loss away from tying the record of most consecutive playoff losses with Marvin Lewis.
That's right.
So if you're a Pittsburgh fan, if you're a Pittsburgh player, certainly if you're George Pickens, who said he's not very optimistic regarding the offense going forward.
He didn't say all those words.
Well, no, but he said, "Are you optimistic?" And he said, "No."
He said, "Nah."
He said, "No." So I would start to be concerned. I think now is the time you move on from Mike Tomlin. I think he's done a fine job, but you know what you have. You're gonna be competitive. You're gonna be fighting for the playoffs every year. That means you're not bad enough to get a good quarterback.
Right.
So you have to keep rolling with this. No offense, this collection of losers that they've had for years and years and years now, and it's just not good enough to ever compete for a championship. The offense isn't near good enough because you don't have the quarterback. It's probably what the problem was with Marvin Lewis. I know the offense wasn't great, but Andy Dalton wasn't a good enough quarterback. He was a fine, serviceable quarterback in the league. He's certainly probably better than anything that the Steelers have had over the last 7 years, 6 years, whatever they've had. I commend Mike Tomlin for an incredible career. He's done a great job. The second he gets let go or he moves on from this job, I do believe that there are going to be a line of people that want to talk to Mike Tomlin. I just don't think you can continue to run him out there year after year, win 9 games, win 10 games, make the wild card round, and lose every single year. At some point, you have to change, especially with the Steelers organization. It's a well-run organization. It's got to end soon, and I think you're going to see that this offseason. I think this might be the end of Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh.
The Steelers' last 5 playoff games, they've trailed 21-0, 28-0, 35-7, 28-0, 21-0. He's not just getting to the playoffs and losing. He's getting to the playoffs, and he's getting dismantled by whoever they play. That dates back to 2017. Yeah. This isn't something new. This is something that's been happening for a long time in Pittsburgh. And everyone says, well, he has the winning record. Well, you just said it. Pittsburgh is such a well-run organization. How well-run are they that you haven't won a playoff game in that long? How many well-run playoff teams have lost, or well-run organizations have lost in the first round of the playoffs and made no material change to their team? I think they might be ran poorly.
Yeah.
How are you okay with this for so long? I think any other team in any other sport would have made a change by this point with this level of mediocrity going on in their facility. I know they keep getting a winning record, and that's great. That's awesome. But you don't advance in the playoffs, who cares about the winning record? We had the conversation with quarterbacks and star players across sports all the time. Who cares about your regular season success if you can't do anything in the playoffs? We talk about it with Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen for basically a segment every day. Why is it not the same with Mike Tomlin?
Yeah.
Why do we give him all these flowers for regular season when he doesn't do anything year after year after year in the playoffs? And there's no punishment for it? There's no repercussions for it? This team's had higher expectations. I know that they haven't been great at the quarterback position since they lost Big Ben, but they've had higher expectations than what they've shown. And even if you're not going to win, you got to be closer. How are you down 3 scores in your last 5 playoff games? That's insane.
Yeah.
No other coach is doing that and having a job for as long as Tomlin's had a job. I know he won a Super Bowl 2 decades ago. That's great. That at least has to run thin at some point.
And that's the argument people keep making is the Super Bowl, the Super Bowl. Mike McCarthy has actually led better. Now, I know they're a bad Dallas Cowboys team this year, but the Dallas Cowboys have been better with Mike McCarthy during McCarthy's run than the Steelers have been during that same amount of time with, of course, Mike Tomlin leading the Steelers. Like, Mike McCarthy is another guy that has won a Super Bowl. And people say, well, I don't care about the Super Bowl. You know, that was Aaron Rodgers. By the way, they beat the Steelers to win that Super Bowl. Let's remember that. Doug Peterson, a coach that just got fired, he's won a Super Bowl, right? Like, so I don't really care that you won the Super Bowl. I think that's great. I think that's fantastic. And I think there's always going to be something there that teams are going to trust you to lead their team. That's why Mike McCarthy, the Cowboys, he probably wasn't their first choice years ago, but hey, you know, that's a Super Bowl winning head coach to lead your franchise. Cool. Doug Peterson will get hired again. He's a Super Bowl winning head coach. Mike Tomlin will get hired. I think Mike Tomlin's a good coach, but at a certain point, the message is just stale. And I think one thing, too, we talk about it with the Steelers because there's not a whole lot of division championships as of late. There's no playoff success, any of that. It has all become about the regular season win-loss record for Mike Tomlin, the streak of never having a season under 500. And it's like, once the Steelers realized, oh, okay, cool, well, we're going to be a team with a 500 record this year, it's like they take their foot off the gas. When that's your identity, is your head coach's streak of not finishing under 500, and that's all you are, that's why they're getting blown out in the playoffs. Who cares what happens? We got Mike Tomlin, his record, right? Who cares what happens? Going back to 2017, Jacob, you talked about it. They're not just getting beat, they're getting blown out, and they're not even coming out of the gates ready to play. It's like, well, we got our 500 record, our streak's intact. Whatever happens is gravy the rest of the way. You're getting beat by bad teams in the playoffs on top of that. The Ravens are not bad. But you let the Browns beat you. All right, you've let the Jaguars beat you. I mean, you got beat by Tim Tebow and the Denver Broncos. Like, these are the quarterbacks you're losing to. Now, Baker's very good. Don't get me wrong. But, like, no one was giving Baker credit years ago when they beat the Steelers. Like, so I'm just saying, like, at the end of the day, this has become a laughingstock. And I'm so tired of people hiding, you know, Mike Tomlin in a box saying, oh, you know, he's won a Super Bowl. You know, he's a leader of men. A leader, every year it's the same storyline. It's you have the record that's still intact, and you have some player who's a bozo that you have to kick off the roster because you can't control him. You're not a leader of men, and you're a leader of the men that want to listen to you, and the men that you can't control, you just get rid of. No other team constantly has the problems that the Steelers do. When you look at Chase Claypool, all right, when you look at Deontay Johnson, when you obviously go back and you look at Antonio Brown, and now you can add, you know, Juju Smith-Schuster, by the way. Oh, and let's add another name to the list now with the psychopath that's catching balls from now. Why is it ever? What are you doing in your culture that's allowing guys to act like this and to constantly feel like they could do and say and act however they want? That's not a good culture. All right, you want to keep winning games, fine. This team never hits the reset button. That's one reason why they continue being 500 or more every single time, is because they have found just enough guys to be competitive with, win your 9 to 10 games every year, but they're never competitive enough to go win a playoff game or win a Super Bowl. If that's what Mike Tomlin's all about, then that's on him. If that's what the Steelers are okay with, then fine, but stop pretending to be this prestigious franchise because you stink. And it's embarrassing watching you get your ass kicked every single year. And I'm tired of every time the next season starts, I can already see the graphic. Week 1 of the NFL season, Mike Tomlin in his 105th year in the National Football League coaching never had a losing season. No one does it better than Mike Tomlin. A lot of damn coaches do it better than Mike Tomlin. Give me a break. If the bar is set low, there's a lot of coaches who could do what Mike Tomlin's doing. Just go out, win 9, 10 games. Don't care about playoff success. Don't care about having an elite quarterback. Don't care about anything. Just go do you. Just worry about your record. Who cares about the rest of the team? I'm sick of the Steelers narrative. I heard it this morning on Get Up and First Take and everything else. Mike Tomlin's problem is they didn't have a succession plan for Ben Roethlisberger. How many teams out there truly have succession plans for their quarterbacks? Because you know what the media also does? When teams try to plan succession plans for their quarterback, we rip them. Remember when the Eagles had the nerve to trade up to get Jalen Hurts? Remember how we blasted that organization and said how stupid they were? Remember when the Falcons decided, even after giving Kirk Cousins all that money, to let's take Michael Penix Jr., a rookie, a succession plan? Remember when we ripped them for doing that? Remember when the Packers, the front office was garbage because, hey, they had the nerve to take Jordan Love when Aaron Rodgers was playing at an MVP-like level? Stop acting like, oh, we praise teams when they do the succession plan thing. You rip them, media. But then when they don't do it, you say they should have had a succession plan. Succession plans don't really work too often. They're hard to figure out. They're hard to do. All right. So anyways, rant over. Oh, the Patriots, by the way. How many times did the Patriots get ripped? Because every time they'd get a quarterback that can rival Tom Brady, when Tom Brady would be out, Matt Castle came in, won 9 games with the Patriots. Got to get rid of Matt Castle. Porn star Jimmy, what's his name? Jimmy Garoppolo. He came in, had success. They were successful without Tom Brady. Had to get rid of him because they were saying, hey, you're creating drama in the locker room. Stop acting like succession plans that media praises that, because media rips it. They rip it every single time because they don't want drama. And then when the team doesn't do it, well, poor Mike Tomlin. If only they would have had a succession plan for Ben Roethlisberger, please. You would have ripped him then too. Anyways, sorry.
I got a succession plan for you. Don't take Kenny Pickett at 20 and stink for once.
Yeah.
Just stink one time, and you'll be fine. Mike Tomlin's a fine head coach. He's a fine head coach. He's not in that upper tier, or he would have figured it out by now. I think that's the main takeaway here. If he's in the Bill Belichick tier of head coaches, which he was talked about in for a very long time, he would have been able to figure it out by now. This has been a long time since Ben Roethlisberger was playing at a high level.
Yeah.
He would have figured it out by now and won a playoff game if he was truly in that elite lineup of coaches. And you said there'd be a long line of teams lining up for Tomlin. I think I agree. I think there would be a pretty high number of teams that want him to be their head coach, but I think it's a very specific team. I don't think you're bringing him in with a lot of change that has to happen. I think you're bringing him into a team that's ready to win now with a quarterback that's, locked in place and, some stars on offense that are locked in place. Like, I don't think he's going to rebuild a team. And I just don't think that maybe that's what is going to push him out of the league. And I mentioned it last week when we talked about him potentially being fired. I wouldn't be shocked if, in classic Steelers fashion, he gets a little corner office up in the Rooney building and just runs, works somewhere in their front office for the next 20 years. And they go to their 4th head coach in organizational history. So I don't know what it'll be, but I would imagine Tomlin is probably a Steeler until he doesn't want to be a Steeler anymore, whether that's as a coach or not. But I think you have to not be expecting playoff wins anymore, right?
No,
going into every season, you have to not be expecting to advance in the playoffs.
Andrew Dunn with the super chat. I fully believe the NFL created the Steelers' schedule this season with the hopes they wouldn't get 9 or 10 wins and waste a playoff spot. Sure enough, it happened again. It's because you can't win a playoff game with this current roster. It's impossible. They're going to have to do a hard reset at some point. You have to get a quarterback that can play the position. I'd imagine they roll it with Justin Fields. I'd imagine that's the case. But if we'll see. I mean,
I've been linked to Rodgers as well.
If the Steelers, next year, if they go and get Aaron Rodgers, they have Justin Fields, would I believe in him then? No, it's because it doesn't really fix any issues. I think there's probably higher upside with Fields, as crazy as that is, because you still haven't seen maybe the best of Fields. But yeah, Pittsburgh, it's got to be frustrating. It's where the Bengals were all those 10 years ago. So it was you're just in purgatory. We do have breaking news, though, Justin. We do have breaking news.
Breaking news.
So
I
don't know if you want to do that next segment or this segment because we're winding down here. But
you can use it as a tease. It's fine.
Drop it and we'll talk about it.
Some interesting Reds news.
Ooh,
I just found out about. So we'll talk about that next.
All right, we'll be right back. More off the bench when we come back. All right, and we are back. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. Casey McAllister in the producer chair, and we are off and rolling here on a Monday. Hope everybody had a great weekend. We, of course, the fallout from the NFL playoffs. We talked about that. Cincinnati Bengals, their search for a defensive coordinator. That's ongoing. Ohio State, Notre Dame in the national championship game. The Ohio State, of course, in the 14 playoff era, won the inaugural 14 playoff national championship. To start that era, they're looking to do the same thing with the 12-team playoff era by winning a national championship. But they'll have to get through former Buckeye and Notre Dame Fighting Irish head coach Marcus Freeman first in that national championship game a week from tonight. And we'll be spending a lot of time on that throughout the week, of course. But there was some breaking news that came out as we closed out the last part of the show. And Elliot, you said it's Reds related. We got some baseball breaking news.
That's
correct?
right. That's right. I think it's bad news. I mean, I don't know.
I think it's good news.
I think this is bad. I'm pretty sure.
The anticipation's killing me. What do we got?
The Cincinnati Reds today announced a new linear and digital rights agreement with Main Street Sports, owner of FanDuel Sports Network, formerly Bally Sports, to produce and distribute Reds games in 2025. Our top priority is to make Reds games accessible to our fans, said Doug Healy, Reds Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer. The decision to stay with FanDuel Sports Networks provides continuity for our fans to watch Reds games as in previous seasons, and now with a direct-to-consumer streaming product available through the FanDuel Sports Network app. So I imagine what this means is if you had YouTube TV, you still can't watch it.
Yeah, it's just like Bally.
It's just Bally
network.
Sports.
Yeah,
so I think that's bad, no? Because it used...
Well, how is that bad?
Because
the other option for this season was for the Reds to do it in-house and get no money. Now they're getting money for TV broadcasts.
No, but it was going to be we paid for it and everybody can watch it and it ends the blackouts.
Less fans are going to be able to watch it. This gets the Reds more money.
Sure,
and they can spend that on players and win games.
Correct, and that's fair. Until
I will watch less Reds games if they get a couple more $1 million they'll spend on this payroll.
Yeah, I mean I get what you're saying, and I'm with you there.
Because the other option was in-house broadcasts that they would have been losing money. This at least someone's paying them for their rights.
But again, I think everybody was excited to have that option to be able to watch Reds games wherever you were. You know, I got a bunch of Reds fans out of Cincinnati that are unable to watch the team because of these stupid restrictions, and now we're going back to it. I want to see the money, and I'm going to be honest with you, the Reds' payroll this season's looking pretty pathetic.
Yeah.
So if this money isn't going towards the team, I'm going to start getting very upset.
Okay.
That's where, I'm with you.
That was at least the first thing I thought when I read it.
I'm with you, but so help me God, if they don't spend on a free agent for the rest of this year or next year, I'm out.
I also could just be wrong.
And I could be wrong too. So I guess we need a doctor, some sort of.
Where's Kirby in the chat?
Some sort of TV doctor to fix this. But everything that
this is a ratings show.
Correct. Everything I'm reading here, this is essentially just Bally Sports. Right. Once again. That's what I'm saying.
So, I do believe you can watch FanDuel Sports TV stuff in FanDuel once you've bet on the game.
LOL.
So you just got to spend $160, put $1 on every game, and you can watch it live on your phone.
So it's been like a little back and forth thing as they try to figure out this. And I'm with you. I see the arguments to both sides. Is okay. Before, at least the team's losing money, but to watch your team they're more readily accessible. So that's a perk. But do you want a team that's not loaded with talent to be readily accessible, or a team that you would think that would have more talent on it because the more money they're getting from Bally, but not as accessible to the fan base? I'll take the latter as far as that's concerned. But again, that's saying that we are all trusting the organization to go the route where the quality of the broadcast isn't as good, but they get more money in return, and we're trusting that money in return is going to go to a better product on the field. That's where I think we're naive in thinking that that's going to be the case, because I think we all agree that they were going to be light spenders this offseason while hoping that they wouldn't be, but using the TV deal as an excuse not to spend money. Now, if they are getting money for this new deal, and it sounds like they are, and they continue just being ghosts in the offseason, I don't really understand how any of us benefited from this. We're right back to the starting block, and instead we had a horrible offseason. Terry Francona was a home run hire, but that might be where it stopped. And we were kind of not okay with it, but understanding of it because of the unfortunate TV deal. But if you're back to having money coming in-house now, get to work, because there's still plenty of names out there that can help make this team beyond competitive in 2025.
Speaking of those names, Anthony Santander and some other big names still on the free agent market were reported as being open to shorter-term deals than they were earlier in the offseason. So I think phenomenal news for the Reds along those lines. It's pretty easy, I think, at least it seems like it would be easy to sell a one-year rental deal on an aging outfielder in GABP, where a guy like Anthony Santander can mash for a year and then go get a massive payday elsewhere. I think if he's looking at a short-term deal, or any of these big names left are looking at a short-term deal, I think that really helps the Reds as we move forward. Maybe that's not what we want as we're looking at this, Terry Francona window as a multi-year thing, but I'll take highly talented players any way I can get them. Beggars can't be choosers.
Yeah. By the way, the chat's begging for it, and at this point, I'm just going to have to ask you about it. Kenner, your thoughts on your quarterback being out for another year?
With the Deshaun thing? Well, there's all these different reports. Some are, like ESPN puts out a report that he could be back, and it's the same injury, obviously, that we saw with Kirk Cousins, and he was back in 7 months' time. But then you hear different reporters like Barry K. Cabot and others saying he's going to be out for the season, and there's just a bunch of mixed reports out there. And then, of course, there's the chances that Cleveland can get out of the remainder of the contract if the setback and the injury was because he wasn't following doctor's orders when it came to the boot. He wasn't wearing. Remember that little video that everyone was mad about of him on the side, the road doing the TikTok while his team was just getting obliterated in the final game of the regular season. There's no boot on that foot. So, and if that's the case, and that's the foot that ends up getting hurt, he rolled his ankle because he didn't have the boot on against doctor's orders, they could potentially get out of that in some capacity. Now, look, I don't know. There's so many moving parts here. The bottom line is they have the number 2 pick. Just get Shador, draft Shador, build around Shador, and that's your quarterback moving forward. It's going to
work this time. It's going to work this time. I believe you. It's going to work. This is going to be the time it works. All those other times weren't the time. This is the time. This is our time to draft a quarterback that's going to work in Cleveland. This is it.
Are you mocking that? Because everyone was mocking you, and you guys finally got lucky with. Oh, that's fine. You could say that.
No, I'm mocking it. I just wanted to stir the pot.
But everyone mocked the
Bengals. I
think the Bengals are probably a top 5 to 7 quarterback franchise of all time.
That's fan-freaking-tastic. They were still a joke until they got Joe Burrow. So that's fine. You can say whatever you want.
We're talking about quarterbacks. You said Bengals were a laughingstock before they got Burrow. That's not true.
They absolutely
quarterback-wise?
Andy Dalton, that's something to throw a parade for.
Andy Dalton,
second MVP voting, made 7 playoffs in a row. He'd be the Browns' best quarterback ever.
Andy Dalton wasn't good enough to be a playoff winning quarterback, but Andy Dalton was probably he was a Kirk Cousins light. Carson Palmer, Boomer Esiason.
But Bengals fans, stop it. Half your fan base is new, just started following the team not even 3 or 4 years ago.
I'm just saying.
That is true, and I hate all of them. I hate all of them.
I don't
I'm just saying.
If you didn't watch 2015, I hate you. That's my bar.
I'm just saying. Here's what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's, we'll see. This is going to be the year. You can't rationally put the Browns and the Bengals in the same class when it comes to quarterbacks. Of course you couldn't do that. It's impossible.
Of course not, Elliot. I mean, come on, stop it with this garbage. Are you kidding? This is what you're trying to do tonight.
You're telling me Boomer, Carson, Andy Dalton, and Ken Anderson.
No.
Joe
I never
Burrow?
put the Browns in the same conversation. I'm saying you're moving the goalpost here because you're trying to take a segmented thing. You absolutely are moving the goalpost. You're absolutely moving the goalpost.
I got to change the subject again. That's fine. I got to change the subject again.
You can change the subject all you want, but you're not going to make stupid comments like that and then not take the comments back. You're good at pushing the buttons, but then when people come back at you, you want to move the goalposts all of a sudden.
But there is no goalpost. There was no goalpost that was
laughing stock as
the
well.
Goalposts stayed where they were.
I think I kept the goalpost the
playoff
same
without a quarterback. Your team misses the playoff with the franchise quarterback. I think that's pretty damn embarrassing too. So
we weren't talking about team success. We were talking about drafting quarterbacks.
We were just talking quarterbacks.
We were just talking about drafting quarterbacks.
Oh, we're going to segment it to just quarterbacks. Team success is all based on quarterbacks.
You're going to like this next. You're going to like this next set. You're going to like this next part. We only got a couple minutes left, and I said I would bring this up. So
bring it up.
A chatter of this great program. His name's Brad. Brad DM'd me, and I'm trying to pull it up right here. Brad DM'd me and said, "We have been cursed in this city, in the Cincinnati world." With the 5, whatever you want to call them, big sports teams, the Cincinnati Bearcats basketball, Xavier basketball, Cincinnati football, Bengals, Reds. Out of those 5 teams, it's been pretty tough, but he said, can we get a Cincinnati toilet bowl rankings on Monday's show? Of the 5 teams I just listed, how would you rank them over the past decade of who's the most sad to who's the least amount of sad?
Least sad, distantly Bengals.
Bengals aren't even in the same world.
Right. I would put UC football also not in the same world.
I would also agree there.
Because they made the playoff and none of the other teams you listed have. Their sport, right?
Yep.
Did Xavier make a tournament in that time?
Of the last 10 years?
UC didn't, right?
UC hasn't made it since 2019.
Oh, okay, less than
so,
that.
But Xavier wins games. Like Xavier is
right. No, I was going to say I put Xavier above UC basketball and then Reds last.
Reds, I would have the Cincinnati Bearcats basketball team maybe last.
Okay.
Because Xavier's third, I think, by a good margin. They have 3 Sweet 16 since 2015. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 second rounds since 2015. I don't know. I think the Bearcats, I'm looking at their history, and it's just sad, man. Over the past 15, 20 years, it's just, I commend Mick Cronin for doing a decent job, but it's just not nearly enough tournament wins. I mean, almost no tournament success in all these years. The last Sweet 16 was 2012. 2001 was the last one before that. In terms of round of 32, 2011, 2012, 2015, 17, 18, only 3 times since 2015. I think they're bad. The Reds have done absolutely nothing. If you're looking at the Reds, they've made the playoffs 4 times since 1995, and they haven't won a playoff series in that stretch. Out of those 4 times they've made the playoffs, they've been swept 3 times. They won, obviously, the 2 games against the Giants in 2012. It's close between the Reds and the Bearcats basketball program.
That's tough.
I'm going to probably go the Reds being the worst of all time, just because
they explain away most of that decade with UC about not being in like a major conference and talent-wise. Like the Reds are a professional team that's expected to win at some point.
Yeah, and they don't win games in the regular season. That's I think the tiebreaker.
Right.
So I'm going to say the Reds are the saddest. The Bearcats basketball team second saddest. Xavier at 3. We have the Cincinnati football program at 2, but you could debate putting Xavier at 2 and the football program at 3, and then the Bengals distantly at number 1, who have not been sad over the last 10 years. Casey, Casey, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that list. I think it's a pretty good list.
If you combine all of those teams, they still don't have the success of the Bengals.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I mean, the rest of the Cincinnati sports teams outside of the Bengals, they still don't have the playoff wins.
Yeah.
That's nuts. We do have an update on the Reds broadcasting before we get off air. You will have a direct-to-consumer subscription option if you are in market. So you won't need a TV subscription if you are in the market. You'll be able to subscribe on FanDuel and get that, without any kind of cable package.
Okay.
You'll be able to just get the Reds. But it does seem like that is restricted to in-market viewers.
All right.
That makes more sense.
All right, well, that wraps it up for us on the radio side. Until tomorrow, this has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers.
All right, we're not on radio, so I'm going to read these super chats. I hate that I have to read them. This was from Justin, and I wish this chat summary would get off my thing so I could read it and get off my screen.
Would you rather me read it?
Please. Well, no, I got it.
Okay.
Justin, $1.99. He paid $2 for me to read this out loud. Get off Ohio State's taint for 2 seconds. Oh, Mark Fetters.
Oh, yeah, there's a follow-up.
Yeah, Mark Fetters, he paid $2 to have me read Ohio State's taint tastes good.
We'll just clip that.
Thank you, guys. Elliot Fact Checker, Haro, member for 15 months. He says Ohio's taint, so that's 3. And Mr. Mo, $5. Bengals were such a joke of a franchise that they have just as many division titles as the rest of the AFC North. Since 2002, Kenner, the only joke is you. Kenner, unfortunately, is not here to hear that. But the point still remains. Bengals, significantly better than the Browns. Not even remotely close. And I don't even think the quarterback comparisons, like, I thought I was pretty consistent on that.
I also
The drafted quarterbacks that we've had
are good.
are significantly better.
Yeah.
And there's far fewer of them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, everyone has fewer.
Yeah.
Aren't they at 40?
Yeah. I mean,
40. 40
it,
quarterbacks.
that's insane. Yeah. That's insane. By the way, Aharo called me a bad fan. I don't know why I'm a bad fan. We were ranking all the sadness in this city. I think that's a pretty fair ranking. You could argue that Xavier's ahead of UC football. I'd put UC football just because the college football playoff is probably the pinnacle of the sport. So UC basketball's been bad, man.
Yeah, no, UC football is. I think it's as big of a fall off from the Bengals to UC football as it is from UC football to the next one.
Yeah, that's fair. I think we're cursed. I think the city's cursed. I don't know if we'll ever see wins here. Xavier get their first win. No respect for UC football Final Four. We are respecting it.
We are respecting UC football Final Four.
We said they're second.
We're saying, yeah, they're the second best team in the sport.
Out of the last 10 years.
Cincinnati.
What are we talking about? I think the Cincinnati basketball program needs to step it up.
What happens with Wes now?
I don't know.
Because he's got to go.
It's a $10 million buyout after this year. So
you can't just call up old Lindy and say, hey, sell that soccer team and get my coach out of here.
The big issue, though, with him is if he gets fired, Cunningham, the AD, he doesn't have a leg to stand on.
So how about I save you some time here?
Okay.
Wrong order. You fire Big C now, and then you wait and see if he can turn around by the end of the season. And if he doesn't turn around by the end of the season, you fire Wes. You get a new AD.
Yeah.
And then you let that AD hire the basketball coach. Right? I mean, right? You have to hire a new AD to hire a new basketball coach.
Yeah, I think you do. I don't know if they're going to, though. And this is where it all comes. I think they've all been pretty bad since entering the Big 12. I think UC Sports have struggled a little bit since entering. It's been a massive step up, and they haven't been ready for it.
How does Wes's and Satterfield's buyout line up? Like, do they fall off at the same time? Do you know?
I don't know.
I was just saying, because then it would maybe make sense if they fall off at about the same time, that you let this AD kind of dribble that out. You fire all three, you have a new AD pick up football and basketball when that happens, as long as it's not, 3-4 years down the line. If we're talking about, a couple years, maybe that's a way to go.
I'm going to have to go deep into the contract stuff this offseason. Because I've got nothing left.
This AD, he's got to go, right?
He has to go. There's no other option. Because if Satterfield's going to be the failure that I know he is, and that respectfully, of course, and Wes is going to do this, I don't know what else you have. Those are our money makers. Those are the two big things we have, and they've been failures over the past several years now. You got to fix it. You got to fix it, and it starts up top. So we'll see what the donors, we'll see what the NIL collective, we'll see what all this equates into the next couple of years. But a lot's going to happen. He's got 1 year. Wes has 1 year. He's got this season, which isn't over. They could figure it out at some point. But if they're bad next year, with the recruits that they're getting, there's no excuse anymore. You can't excuse it.
Fred M says the Cyclones have won a couple Kelly Cups in a decade. We forgot them.
Yeah, I did.
The Captain America's shield that FC Cincinnati won.
That's right, Casey. You did get the shield, the supporters' shield.
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
Where do you rank the supporters?
Where does your supporters' shield fall?
Where does that rank?
Is winning the supporters' shield the same as like finishing third in the AFC North?
Well, in Soccerland, supporters' shield is like a Super Bowl. That's like winning the.
No, winning
in other leagues,
the
it's
cup
like winning
would be winning the Super Bowl.
No, like that's the trophy that you go to win for in soccer is the supporters. Like winning league, like that's what you want. But in our MLS league, since there is actually a Super Bowl trophy, like the MLS Cup, that's the. It's hard to explain, but in Soccerland, supporters' shield would be a bigger deal than winning the whole tournament. So.
I hate soccer so much, man.
But I would say that FC is probably
3.
No, it's second.
You think?
Yeah, if we're including.
What have they done? I'm genuinely asking. Like they lost a championship.
They they did not make it to the championship, but they've been to the
they
championship.
lost to Philadelphia.
No.
They've won. They have been to the conference finals
Oh.
a couple different times.
Gotcha.
And they've won playoff games. They've been in the playoffs 3 separate times now in a row. But that is starting to come to an end. So over the weekend, you know how Friday's show we were making the bit about
The updates.
about Denki and whatnot. Well,
Denki.
Lucho did not show up
Of course.
Oh no.
to the team.
He hates it here.
He really hates it. And on top of that, I guess FC might be loaning. I don't know if it's loaning or if they're trading away Luca Areno. That deal did not go through, I guess. Impending sale of Luca Areno, which is not good because he was one of our better players last year. And someone did a graphic of our lineup and had Kubo on there like 3 separate times because we have no one.
That's good.
So that's great.
That's good. Colton makes a great point in our chat. You just said that no one cares about like the championship. They just care about having the best record in the regular season. Mike Tomlin would be the greatest soccer coach of all time.
He would be.
You just win the regular season
He would
trophy
be.
every year. You lose
That's
in
a
the
good
first round of the
point,
playoffs.
Colton.
No one cares.
That's
You won
a
the
great
Supporters'
point.
Shield. Who cares about the MLS Cup? You win the regular season award. Mike Tomlin would be the GOAT of soccer coaches.
That's a really good point, actually.
Well, if he was number 1 in the AFC every year, maybe. But
well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
He just dominates the regular season. They're hanging around all the time.
Yeah.
yeah.
That'd be pretty big time. That's a great point.
But yeah, that's it. That's all I had. That's all I had to bring to this.
All my
program
long
today.
shot wild card Super Bowl champions, I bet on loss.
Yeah.
Every single one of them.
We'll talk more about the NFL, I assume, later this week. But
Yeah.
Those games sucked out loud.
I'm just glad we have the NFL playoffs to come around and save us from that college football blowout nonsense. I mean, I can't sit on my couch and watch college football every day
I knew you
and
was
all
gonna
these
do it.
games be multi-score
I knew
games
you
in
was
the
gonna do it.
playoffs, the pinnacle of your sport.
I knew
you
he
get to
was
the
gonna do it.
playoffs and there's blowouts. No, I'll
should've known.
take my NFL.
We should have known.
I'll take my NFL.
We should have known, Casey. I knew you
I
would.
I sent Jacob a thing on Twitter yesterday.
Yeah, it's
Basically
the
that.
you know the like two picture like the fat guy and the attractive woman help HR. It was the first round college football scores and the first round NFL scores.
I'll pull it up.
They're it's the exact same thing.
Yeah, it's brutal. It's brutal to be on this side. But
Also, everyone trying to dunk on me for how awesome the playoffs have been lately. I ask you this question: how much does the overall playoffs change? You eliminate the first round. You start at 8.
nothing.
Literally not one bit.
So I do agree.
Oh, there you go.
Hold on. I need to. I'm gonna wait till it shows up on my screen so I can read it a little bit
The delay is always tough for reading pictures.
because I just can't read it. But hold on, the delay is getting there soon.
It's coming. There it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're just
Same scores.
so many bad games too. We'll see. If the NFL playoffs, for what it's worth, are like how college football's finished, we're in for a good weekend.
It's true. That's true. Do you think there's too many teams in the NFL playoffs?
We're getting there.
14 out of 32?
We're getting there.
I think half the league's way too many.
I feel like if you're, and I hate saying this, but there should almost be like a play-in if you're going to do the 7 teams.
Yeah.
Like the 7 and the 6 will play each other for the final spot.
And you only do 6?
And it's not really the playoffs, but it is the playoffs. You know what I'm saying?
I like that. I just think 14 out of 32 teams is...
And he gives essentially everybody a bye. But yeah, I don't know. Is Elliott blind? Yes, I am.
Confirmed.
We'll see. I knew the Broncos were frauds. I knew it.
Yeah.
They were so bad, so quickly.
I couldn't have read that Texans-Chargers game more incorrectly.
Neither could I.
I mean, I could not have been more wrong if I tried to be about
Yeah.
that Texans-Chargers game. I mean, I picked the Chargers, obviously was wrong there, but even my whole rationale that they wouldn't be able to run it effectively and CJ couldn't throw against those DB, they killed them in every facet of the game.
Yeah. I mean, the Chargers have some bugaboo, just like the Bengals did a while ago, and it's just gonna take a franchise-altering player that's not apparently Justin Herbert to be able to break that curse.
Could that franchise-altering person be Harbaugh? And this was just like too quick, and he hasn't really got his hands in there yet.
That could be it.
They weren't supposed to be in the playoffs this year.
That's fair.
Like, I still have faith that maybe that person is Harbaugh.
It could be. I just think the Herbert discussion, and I said it earlier on.
Yeah, it's dead.
I said it earlier on in the year. He's just not. He's the best hypothetical quarterback that's ever played this sport.
That's a hell of a hypothetical draft class. Honest.
It is. It's an all-time. What if Tua stayed healthy? What if Joe Burrow had a defense? It's like, what if Herbert had one wide receiver outside of Ladd McConkey? And you go down the line, it's like, what if Herbert had this and that? What if his coaches weren't bad? Justin Herbert's not in the. There's a clear drop off from Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, and Lamar Jackson. Those 4 quarterbacks are in a world of their own. Herbert, I don't think is close to that. Herbert,
see, that's the thing is, like, I would still have him in the conversation for that 5 spot.
No, I don't.
I just think the drop off from 4 to 5 is bigger than we thought it was. But I don't look at the NFL and see a bunch of quarterbacks I'd take over Justin Herbert.
You're right. You're
Like,
right.
That's my thing. I think what this weekend did was pound in that top 4.
Yeah.
Because if there was one that people would try to push in there, it was Herbert. I don't know, man. He's not anything like those 4. It's just like, I'm not taking Tua over him.
No.
I'm not taking Russ over him.
Maybe
CJ, but I think that was a conversation before the season as well.
Maybe Hurts.
Maybe Hurts.
If Hurts wins the Super Bowl this year, you'd have to.
I'm gonna have a really, really tough time with that if Hurts wins the Super Bowl.
So we'll see what happens.
AJ Brown hates Jalen Hurts so much that he reads a book about how to stay in the moment on the sideline.
That's tough. Because the cameras are there. They're going to see you reading.
It was the highest selling book on Amazon yesterday.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Are you shitting?
No.
What a joke. Yeah, that's that situation. I don't know how they win games because that's just a weirdo world they got going on in Philadelphia. Do you see the Philadelphia fan that went viral?
Yeah.
Hope that guy's life is over.
They suck.
That's tough.
Philadelphia fans. They stink.
Oh, they're the worst.
Yeah,
they're I mean, I blame that guy's such a scumbag loser. You almost can't wear your team gear if you're an opposing fan when you go there.
No,
Like,
it's really high up there for where I want to go for an away game.
I mean, it would be electric. I just think
I want to go so bad.
Man, those fans. Oof, I want no part of that.
Yeah, I was there for the in Philly. It was the only time I've ever been to a Philadelphia sporting event in Philly, and it was for the Ben Simmons didn't shoot the layup against the Hawks, Game 6 of the playoffs.
Okay.
You would have thought Ben Simmons grabbed a gun out of his duffel bag and shot someone in the face. Like the way that stadium reacted, and then the fallout after the game, and the walk, the parking lot, and like I had bought a Sixers hat on the street.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm gonna root for the Hawks. Who cares? Their reactions, like I'm a pretty crazy sports fan. I put myself kind of towards that side of the spectrum. They're a different world.
Oh yeah.
Philadelphia is crazy, and the way those fans carry themselves is look, I like to yell at opposing fans as much as the next guy, but there's lines, and they just
there's no line. There's no lines in Philly. But I want to talk more about the playoffs later this week because there were a couple things that we didn't get to talk about today. The Herbert thing was one of them.
Yeah.
I think if you look at where and again, I could be wrong on this, the Texans, where they're going this year and next year, like it does feel like a little bit like the Bengals. Like it's a little bit like it. It's not exactly the same. They didn't have a dominating season this year, but a young quarterback, a solid defense, an okay defense, making some noise in the playoffs. I think that's an interesting storyline going forward. And the Green Bay Packers, man, the Jordan Love, I want to believe. I want to believe in Jordan Love, but boy, does he stink.
I'm holding on to a little bit of fingers crossed hope that elbow bothered him.
Yeah, that could be it.
I don't know. Maybe that's just wishful thinking, but he did not look like Jordan Love. At least the times that he's looked awesome, he didn't look like that at all in the playoffs. Do you give the Texans even a snowball's chance in hell this weekend?
No.
I also think too the Eagles are a much different team than they were week 1.
Yeah.
That defense has been leaps and bounds better than what it was when they first showed each other. And it was Brazil game too, so maybe it was a little of a false hope there.
No,
But
you're
also
right.
too, like the injuries didn't help. They had a lot of injuries that game and throughout the game.
He was throwing to me and you.
Yeah.
To also be fair. Now he missed some open guys, but I mean, when you already don't have Christian Watson with the torn ACL, then you lose Romeo Doubs early, and then you lose Jaden Reed late. It was Josh Jacobs or nothing for that offense, and I just don't know how much of that I'm going to blame on Jordan Love. But yeah, I mean, he looked terrible against Chicago before he got hurt. He didn't end the season strong.
If he didn't throw an interception, they win that game. If they played turnover-free football, they win.
Well, he did throw 3 interceptions.
I know.
Oh, okay.
And they were terrible.
They were bad.
The one interception where he threw over the middle and it was just not a receiver in sight. I couldn't believe that. I think that was the one right before halftime. What are you doing? What are you doing?
There also was probably a moment of weakness opening kickoff, and you fumble. And
How is that not overturned?
I have no clue.
How was that not overturned?
That's terrible. That's terrible because it literally, like,
He was laying on his back with the football.
We all saw the video, so I don't get it. I don't get the NFL officiating, man.
Was that we have angles they don't have thing?
I guess.
Because they mentioned that with the sky cam. They were like, now we're going to go to the sky cam, blah, blah, blah. Like, I wonder if they don't have those angles.
Yeah.
That always rocks my world when broadcasts have angles that refs don't have.
That's
If anything,
it
should be reverse.
just such a joke.
But I also don't understand technology-wise how we all just don't have every angle.
I mean, I won't sit here and act like it's not impossible, but it does start to get a little crowded because there's probably 20 plus cameras that they use for broadcasts.
Yeah, even more.
So I don't know. It would be. I don't know. They probably just don't think Skycam is.
What's
like
the
one of those
building for
cameras.
then? Like, they have the whole ass building in New Jersey for replay.
Yeah.
Put one extra TV for the Skycam.
Yeah.
They built a building for it.
Just think of all the things that they probably were like, Skycam, we don't need that.
Yeah.
There's 20 other cameras here that are going to get the same thing.
You're right.
That's it.
100% true.
That's it. I got to go sneeze and cough. So I've been fighting it back for about 5.5 minutes. So, and I'm sorry for all the noises toward the end. We love you. We will see you tomorrow. We do have boxed lunch coming up. Give us like 20 minutes. See you then. Sorry.